Welcome to another episode of the Supernova Lab District 6 Technologies Inc. Mastery Series, where we have conversations with industry game changers in the Caribbean and in the diaspora. I'm Jonathan Sylvester, co-founder of District 6 Technologies, along with my business partner, Javon Robinson. We will lead you through a series of discussions and give you insights to critical topics impacting Barbados and the wider Caribbean. In line with Supernova Lab's Arc Academy's mission, this six-part series is designed to equip innovators, researchers, and emerging founders with access to insights from our region's best minds to build mission-driven experiments. Today, my esteemed colleague Javon will be discussing prototyping governance, policy design for a world in flux with Graham Thompson. Graham represents World Digital Governance, an independent, not-for-profit organization dedicated to building ethical, secure, and sovereign digital futures. He works with governments, particularly in developing nations, to design unified data frameworks that protect national sovereignty while enabling economic growth and digital trust. If you are a policymaker or analyst, digital governance leader, international development professional, a CIO, a CTO, technology manager, this is a critical episode to tune into. As always, public value lies in tempering hype with responsibility, helping institutions ask better questions before adopting multiple digital systems. That being said, spread the word, like and subscribe to this series, and join our community. Javon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that illustrious introduction, and welcome, Graham, to our podcast, the Mastery Series. How are you doing, Graham?
I'm doing good, guys, and thank you very much for introducing me and asking me to play my small part in the great efforts that you guys are doing in Eastern Caribbean. Just arrived back in Jamaica on Monday evening, getting over a little bit of jet lag, seeing some sun after 2 months of uninterrupted rain and cold in London.
Yes.
So, it's great to be here. Great to be with you guys, one of the best voices in the Caribbean, and our friend Javon, and I'll do my best to keep up with you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Graham. Listen, you're a man with an international repertoire, and even more so, WDG. You guys have an international footprint. But as we get into the meat of our conversation today, just give us some context in terms of what brought WDG to the Caribbean. As you mentioned, you've come from rain and bad weather in the UK, you're back in Jamaica. What brought you guys to the Caribbean? And let's talk about digital governance and why it's so important for our collective digital futures. Let's kick off. Okay. Let's kick off with that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've opened up a massive area of discussion around the world right now, and it's highly relevant to the Caribbean that we are talking about this. How did we get here? Well, that's a good question, and I think it's important to give a little bit more context about me and why I would be interested in world digital governance.
Yes,
I'm not an expert. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not an AI guy. I'm not a policy expert. I haven't come from government. I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen of New Zealand originally, and still am. I proudly hold a New Zealand passport still. I live in the UK. I've worked in most continents and many countries over a career that's too long and too painful to go into in detail. But I've found myself here, having made lots of mistakes. That's why it's painful, but learning. And I'm very privileged, I think, to be involved in this vital topic at the sort of back end of my career, because it gives me a great reason for being engaged. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't think of a better part of the world to be engaged. So how did we get here in the first place? I've been working also with another company that you've probably heard of, Intelibus. We're a fintech organization. Some people from Intelibus plus other interested parties in the US and Europe got together to create the vision of world digital governance. But Intelibus is a financial technology company based in the US with operations in Europe and in the UK. We have people in the subcontinent, and now we have 100 people, or Intelibus has 100 people in Jamaica. Now I can give you a little bit of context on that. Why did we come to Jamaica? You know that my Intelibus and WDG colleague Ed Watal came to the Eastern Caribbean about 18 months ago, and we met some government representatives, some premiers, went to various countries, Antigua and others, and looked at what the talent pool looked like here. The reason we came, through some cricket contacts I won't go into, that you know a little bit about. We'd spent nearly a year previously looking at other countries where we maybe might have been able to build a talent pool to put into recruit for our company and for companies that we work with, particularly in the US, but in Europe as well. We looked at places like Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, and Cyprus, and great people, great opportunities, but for various reasons we didn't reject them, but we didn't go all in on any of those. So then we came to the Eastern Caribbean, had a look there, and again met some great people, saw the elements of potential talent among youth, but at that time, without severing connections with people in the Eastern Caribbean, particularly people like you and other people in the Barbados government and so on, that we've been having some conversations with through CARICOM. But we also had some connections with the university in Jamaica, the regional HQ. And our first conversation with them was, we run an AI masterclass at New York University in New York City. That's for very senior executives, and excuse me for coming round to your question through the back door, but we'll get there. But it's important to understand the context.
Context, of course.
The context is that there are a couple of things that thread together here. One is that people in business who are making decisions, and always have been, about critical digital technology investments, strategies, tactics, whatever it might be, very often do not know well what they're talking about. That's not to disparage those folks. That's not necessarily their job. But particularly with the rapid pace of change of technology now and the coming of AI, we don't want to hype that up. I don't think it needs any hyping up from us. We prefer not to talk too much about AI. It's a part of the digital technology environment. But at the same time, the university and ourselves, through our own efforts at educating, helping to educate very senior executives, we started the conversation at that level, and then said to the university, what we're as equally interested in, excuse me, is identifying youth talent in Jamaica and in the broader Caribbean. Yeah. Why do we want to do that? Because there's a great shortage of skilled, high-quality software engineers globally, especially in the north, where the education system hasn't been able to keep up with the rapidly changing environment and the kinds of skills and capabilities that the world's best software engineers need. We're a relatively small company. We sift through thousands of people a year to hire a handful. Mm-hmm. And we're not alone in that, especially in the financial technology space. So the conversation turned to how can we identify some more talent that we can train? We first came to Jamaica in January last year. Ed spoke at the JSE conference, Stock Exchange conference there, and he talked about the fact that all of us, and not just those of us in the Caribbean who have a a painful history, as some of us know, but people in the Caribbean know better, around slavery. First we had human slavery, then we had economic slavery, and now we have what we call digital slavery, where you don't own your digital you. This is my phone. Anything I've chosen to put on there and share with anybody, or every time I've filled out a form to the bank, or joined Facebook or whatever it is online, or had any interaction with government, I've been giving away my data.
Right.
And people have happily, merrily been taking all of that for the last 20, 25 years and monetizing it, stealing it essentially without our permission. How many of us have ever checked the terms and conditions when we signed up on a website? I haven't.
You don't.
My life is too short.
No clue.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've been merrily doing that, but we don't think that is we don't think that's the way forward. I'll come back to that in a second. So anyway, we recognize that there are many highly intelligent and capable young people in this region. What they need is opportunity. So we concluded that the best way to identify this in the short term was to run some hackathons. I won't go into what a hackathon, I'm assuming most people listening to this and you guys know very well what a hackathon is.
Absolutely.
So we ran a hackathon in March last year from a cold start, and in a month we put together a hackathon that attracted about 500 people, 500 young kids. And we hired some of those. We gave some support to others that we wanted to start on the training journey, and we hired some as interns. Now, the principle behind this was, how do we at scale create large numbers of highly skilled people? The best way to do that, and we concluded, was to create an AI academy in the Caribbean. That's something that we probably don't have time to go into in detail, but the vision is that between March last year and the end of the year, we plan to hire about 100. We got there.
Fantastic.
Some of those are admin staff in our office here to support what we do, but the majority either now have jobs working with clients in the States, or they are on the journey of being prepared. We then held another one in October of last year, and we got 750 kids turned up for a hackathon. That's the level of enthusiasm. Now, how young? Well, with their parents there, of course. We got two 12-year-olds.
Wow.
Excellent, really, really brilliant kids. And then there's no upper age limit. So you don't have to be a graduate. You don't have to be at university. Gotcha. You might be at school. You might be somebody who's a nurse of 35 or 40 years old who's really interested in jumping in and seeing what all this is about. There are no barriers, because it's not necessarily a degree that's going to make you a great software engineer.
What I find interesting, Graham, and thank you so much for setting the foundation of what brought you guys to the Caribbean, very intriguing. What I find interesting about what you said there and the uptake, 750 second instance, first instance, I don't remember the number, but you had a good turnout also.
500.
500 there.
750. 750.
Okay.
So, the thought that came to my mind is this. Many persons have opined that the Caribbean is behind when it comes to digitization. Caribbean students aren't necessarily not up to speed, except for social media, Facebook, all the things that you mentioned there. But here it is that you've come as WDG, brought a concept to the Caribbean, and the uptake has been really phenomenal. So what is your view, therefore, for those who say that the Caribbean is not ready for the digital future that the rest of the world is engaged in?
Well, that is as they used to say before inflation, the $64,000 question.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
Keen to hear you on this one.
yeah,
Keen to hear you, yes.
exactly. As an answer to your question, first of all, we saw it in the eyes and enthusiasm of the people who come, who want to be part of this, who want to create a new future for their country and for themselves.
Yes.
So for those people who say that the region is not ready, then I would say today that's true.
Okay.
But there is every reason to believe, and that's why we've invested our own time and our own money and our own resources and our own vision into this part of the world. Because one, there is a talent pool that is ready to be guided and provided with the tools to take all of us forward into a prosperous future.
Okay.
But two, what we also recognize is the fact that the businesses, so the private sector, and a growing number of those people who are policymakers,
Yeah.
they might be politicians or they might be civil servants or others, they have a growing recognition that this is kind of an existential moment. We break it down into 3 buckets. There was a hardware battle in this space, call it a battle.
Yeah.
But and it's an ongoing tussle. But various people have dominated the hardware world of technology.
Yeah.
We know who they are.
Of course.
There are others who are now dominating the software world, and we know who those people are without naming them, and all due respect to them, but some of them don't necessarily have the best interests of the citizens of the world at heart, because for reasons that we just touched on a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
There is one other space that is critical to that future, but nobody yet dominates it. And I'm not talking about domination in the sense that, it's kill or be killed kind of thing, but nobody really has a whole handle on all of this. US employers, European employers all lament the fact that there's many more jobs, even in this era of AI, many more jobs than they can find good people for. So that's a matter of, and just by way of a side note, when Ed was here for the Jamaica Stock Exchange conference, the question was put to him, well, what's going to happen? It's because 12 months ago, you probably remember, everybody was full of doom and gloom stories about how, this was the end of employment as we know it.
Yeah.
To take the theme of a well-known REM song.
Yeah.
Everybody was worried that nobody's going to have a job and we're all going to have
yeah.
to live on universal basic income.
Exactly.
Well, we have a very different view to that.
Uh-huh.
And I can come on to that later if you remind me, because I'll probably forget.
I'll remind you for sure.
The point of that is that Ed was asked this question and he said, well, for those people whose jobs it was in the past to answer questions, some of those jobs might disappear, and we can, obviously think about, the BPO sector in this part of the world, which, has had a very, very good history over the past 25 years or so, and has provided lots of great jobs for people. That's, and again, no disrespect to that sector, it's a very important one, and it's provided a lot of jobs. But there's 2 things. One, AI will impact that with new agents, and second of all, the salaries of those have been predicated on the assumption that what they are doing, what these big global companies, the banks and the, whatever it is, they are offshoring here for low wages, low cost resource.
Yeah.
Correct.
We have a very different 180-degree difference view about that. We believe that it's critical in this new and transformed technology environment that we can train people in this part of the world and enable them to win against any other competition, high-value jobs, and in this new world of connectivity, live at home.
Yeah,
So-
operate as though they're remote.
Yeah.
They're
remote.
remote workers, and the connectivity today, if it's well set up, and we'll come on to that infrastructure question in a minute as well, because that's critically related to governance as well. But if you can imagine that here I am, you're in Toronto, right, Jivan? Yeah. So you're the perfect example of the diaspora. Reluctantly, I'm presuming, leaving your country of birth, one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited, I have to say, although it was a fairly hairy landing on the
That small airstrip.
on that airstrip, and we should be able to do something about that in the future. But
Just as an aside, just as a brief aside, that folks know we're talking about Montserrat. That's where I'm from.
Yes,
So
indeed.
in case folks are wondering, like, what island
Like,
is that?
which island is that, right?
You know.
It could be
yes,
a few.
so without
It could be
choosing
a
favourites, I'm not choosing favourites, but Montserrat is a startlingly beautiful place, and of
you.
course I'd heard about it, for all kinds of reasons going back many, many years, but most famously in the UK, most people remember it or know of it, never having visited, know of it as the spot where George Martin created some of the great albums of the 20th century. So anyway, that was a great privilege to go there. So the thread of this is you being in Toronto with many other hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I think it is millions of Caribbean citizens who are now US or dual citizens or whatever it is, and then an equal number in Europe and particularly in the UK.
Okay,
All taking their families, their histories, and it's easy for me to understand this because I'm a New Zealander, in our own way, we've had the same experience of people reluctantly leaving what we think is one of the most beautiful parts of the world with the greatest lifestyle and all the rest of it. We can play a bit of cricket, we win a few sailing races and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Anyway, that aside, that's a net loss to the country. And despite the fact that you, as a member of the diaspora, might send money back at, like the Philippines or wherever else it is, you send money back. But that's not a sustainable long-term growth. It takes away dignity. It takes away work. It takes away family ties. It takes away the heart of a country. So what we want to do is enable those people, as you were saying, Jono, to stay at home, get high-value wages, jobs, salaries, and what does that do? It brings money back into the country. It enables people to stay at home, raise their families, look after their parents, and successive generations. Sorry, German.
One of the key things that's coming to mind, and very interesting conversations so far, your insights are absolutely amazing. One of the key things that's coming to mind in terms of, we talk about digital future, but also too, we talk about the issue of brain drain, which is what we're really addressing here, which has really been synonymous with the Caribbean for quite a number of years. With the possibilities that technology presents for Caribbean youth, many of them are coming to your hackathon, 750, 500 in the other instance, etc. How do we get Caribbean governments on board? Let's talk policy for a bit.
Yeah, sure.
To realize the importance of having that policy framework in place so that these very same North American / European / Canadian companies we're talking about who want to outsource to the region feel secure that the policy framework is there, data security, tech security, cyber security, all the different things. How do we get our governments on board from a policy framework perspective? And what has been your experience actually coming into Jamaica, into the Caribbean, and doing what you're doing there?
That's a great question. All right, let's again just very briefly contextualize that question, at least from my perspective. If we are to have the things we've just been talking about, i.e. regionally harmonized, interoperable set of countries, let's say under the aegis of an organization like CARICOM, if we're to have that, then that in itself underpins everything we want to do about jobs, because jobs are the critical part for the future. So just a couple of figures here, just so we get our heads around that, and then it comes directly into policy. The World Bank puts out a report, UN, obviously, UNESCO and various other organizations, they put out lots of reports. But last year, both those organizations put out some pretty interesting information about the future of youth and youth jobs. And without being exact about the numbers, the World Bank and the UN expect that by the year 2035, there's going to be something like 1.2 billion people in the world, a preponderance of those people being in developing nations, of people under 26.
Okay.
That's a pretty staggering number.
Now,
That's a big number.
At the same time, they say that there are only likely, again, I don't have the numbers exact, to be around 500 million jobs for those people that they can identify now. Mm-hmm. It's an enormous number of people, and it's a problem for not just those developing nations that want to advance and keep their people in their own countries, but it's also, and this doesn't come from me, it comes from these organizations, it's also one of the big drivers of one of the most important issues for the developed nations right now, is how to get control, if I can use that word, how to be able to develop sustainable policies for immigration. So these jobs and this jobs shortfall is an existential issue, not just for individual countries, but for the world as a whole. If we can, roughly agree on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
It gets very political very quickly, but let's stay away from that and just think about that. So, how do the developing nations develop their resources, their natural advantages, give jobs and dignity and more money in the pockets of their own citizens? Now, we've spent the last 70 plus years thinking from a mindset that it's all about, well, if the developed nations give the developing nations a whole bunch of money and some expertise and, this, that, and the next thing, then it's going to transform the world. Mm-hmm. Now, that all has its place, and that's very important, but from our perspective, we would say the model needs to be tipped so that it's not about aid, but it's about investment, and hard-nosed investment in futures, so that everybody wins something out of this. And we try to solve some of those big problems we just mentioned by creating high-value, sustainable jobs in developing nations. Now, it's easy for me to say that. I can trip that off my tongue 100 times a day, and it's not going to make an ounce of difference, and pretty soon people stop listening. So how do we see ourselves in this increasingly digital world, turning that into some kind of reality? Because the flip side of that is that if we don't address this as a problem, speaking in here in Jamaica, in the region, being part of a developing region, if we don't address that, then we're going to have our lunch cut by everybody anyway.
Yeah.
That's a one-way street. So what we can do, coming back to the point before about the hardware and the software world, we're not going to compete in that. There'll be nice companies that have come up, and people will come up with a really great, some great products in smaller countries. It happens all the time. But we're not going to find an NVIDIA here, or we're not going to find a ChatGPT here until we have great software engineers who are really good, who stay here and want to set up their own companies in the long term, and they may become the next Barbados or Antigua or Trinidad or Jamaica unicorn. Now we'd love to see that, but you've got to put everything in place for that to happen, and that is the people and setting up that infrastructure for learning and then getting people jobs. So before, I know you want to ask another question, Giovanna. What we are doing with this academy, and we're coming to the question of policy, what we want to do is create an academy that will be able to sustain and build lots of talented, capable people on that supply side, but on the demand side also create an ecosystem of infrastructure of people that believe and know through experience that we have people here who can fill those jobs and do a really great job. That's on the demand side. So we have to bring those two things together, because it's all very well training a whole bunch of people, but where do those jobs come from? So we see it as a job equally to train people and at the same time help create the ecosystem that will create the demand and the pull for all of these jobs. And so this is the basis of the academy. So to come to your question about policy, why is policy so important to what this is all about? It's really important for several reasons from our perspective, and these are conversations we've been having. I'll give you an example of how this is going forward in a practical sense. We can talk about, politicians have to know more. They have to make good decisions. They have to, put more money in, and all of those things. These are all, yes, that's true, but how does that happen? How do you make that happen, and when? So let's come on to WDG and that very question of how do we get our policymakers to be responsive to this and put the preconditions in place that will allow this educational transformation of our youth be enacted. That's your question, I think, right?
No, we're talking about the whole policy conversation.
Yes.
And the fact that technology is moving at a rapid pace, as we're all aware on this call. However, some would say that the pace of policy making, especially, no disrespect, within the developing world context, sometimes seems to move at snail's pace.
Yes.
So with what we're hoping to achieve in terms of jobs particularly, and to make these international companies that we're seeking our youth in the Caribbean to realize these opportunities, even within the global context, and farming out some of these jobs to the developing world, how do we get policymakers to see that they need to move at a quicker pace to keep abreast with the pace of technology? When it comes to data security, cybersecurity, if you're looking for fintech organizations to move into the region, different things like that need that policy framework, legislative framework for their protection.
Yes, great question. And let me see if I can answer it this way. First of all, it's one thing to recognize that you need to move and make changes in terms of the regulatory, legal environment, et cetera, but it's and also the infrastructural environment, which I was going to come on to as well, which is the critical thing. So one is the what, and the other is the how, if we can simplify it like that. And the what starts with the political will. Mm-hmm. I think, from what I've heard, that jobs are high on the agenda of many, if not most, both business and political leaders in the region, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's what we hear.
Yeah.
And that's not just from what we hear, but in some pockets it's from the actions of what people are doing as well. So what we think is important, and we're not alone in this. This isn't our unique insight. It's an insight that lots of people have. But then to this point about how you change it, one is to raise the existential importance of action on this. And what do I mean by action, and what do you want to create? What are the conditions in the future state you want to create by taking action? I would put that in a nutshell around technology, digital technology education, and creating a regional digital services hub for the rest of Latin America as a starting point. I would say that first of all, you need not just the largest nations, but in particular, I suppose, the largest most populous nations in the region, let's say the CARICOM region, to be able to secure and store and use data in a operationally integrated, harmonized way.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that, first of all, is to give the region the heft, if you like, to be able to speak with one voice when it comes to what the global environment is that we as a region are operating in. We have the US on the one side that is, to sort of very simplify it down to, meaninglessness. They're on the free-for-all, no digital sovereignty. We've got your data anyway, guys, and get used to it, and we're going to keep using it. Forget it.
Yeah.
So there's that's on one side, let's say. I'm simplifying way too much. And then on the other side, we have what is, not surprisingly, a somewhat more cautious, wouldn't say perhaps considered, but what are they considering? That's the critical question. The GDPR type approach of we've got to be ultra cautious around people's data and our own data, our national data, and therefore what that risks is tamping down the greatest opportunities for innovation, for job creation, and so on and so forth. And we can see those tensions day by day. Where is the Caribbean going to sit in that? Politicians and business and community groups and citizens, and as I said at the start, I'm a citizen, this affects all our futures individually. We have to have a voice in that decision making, because if all of those parties don't have a voice in that, we don't have trust. And trust is obviously a very important aspect of our digital futures and data and how data is used. We don't have transparency. If we don't have, and we don't have clarity. If all of those parties are not involved and there's not oversight and clarity about what is being done, now what we want to do is to encourage the greatest level of innovation and learning and capability and job creation and that we can possibly do in this region.
Yes.
At the same time as having guardrails in place that secure the data, ensure a cyber environment that is trusted, creating infrastructure that is transparent in how it operates, with support from the correct other back-end infrastructure like data centers and power. Mm-hmm. All of these things really important. How does that all happen? Now, you've got to start by getting people sitting around a table and collaborating and deciding what the principles should be to guide the decision-making in the legal and regulatory environment that makes that happen. So we're like acronyms in our world, and we call this we call this PROS. It stands for policy, it stands for regulation, it stands for ontology, without going into the ontological details, which we could be here for 5 weeks on. That's to enable transparency and the ability for us all to be talking roughly the same, well, not roughly, but very much the same language. No matter where we are, so that we have a common way of dealing with all of this. Yeah. That helps our rule making. It enables us to set standards. So that's policy, regulation, ontology, standards, and the last one is E for ethics. How do we create an environment that is trusted, transparent, clear, and ethical? So policymakers have to ask themselves a whole bunch of questions about all of that. What have we done so far to help encourage this? We are working with CARICOM, the ICT ministers of CARICOM, of which your very own Mr. Reid is intimately involved, along with other ministers, and the CTU. Of course, last September, just before the Hurricane Melissa came along, we had a conference in Jamaica at which WDG sponsored a resolution to the ministers and CTU around digital policy for the region. Now, this was an effort not only from WDG and a couple of working groups we set up with experts across the region and beyond, but it was also in association with a team from Mona campus, the University of the West Indies, that had been, before we saw what they were doing and started to help them, were creating an inventory of regulation, laws, and policy environments, etc., across the Caribbean nations as well as the world. So we did a compare and contrast exercise to come up using the experts in our working group to look at this with what are the principles that need to drive a regional digital policy environment that will enhance the objectives that we've been talking about in this conversation. We had long conversations with all of those ministers who attended around what this vision incorporated and how we could turn this into reality. During those conversations, and I met nearly every ICT minister in the region during that week and had conversations with nearly all of them. So, you ask the question, well, what are they thinking? At least I've got a starter for 10 idea because I've talked to most of them. And most of them recognize the importance of jobs, the importance of high-value jobs that will help bring people, keep people home, maybe bring a lot back to their own countries, which I think is a trivial exercise.
That's the ultimate thing. Yep.
Exactly. So most of those people, all of those people, without exception, let me say, recognized the critical importance of these jobs. They recognized the critical importance of being in the game, in the digital technology transformation game. Some people we talk about AI and people use that language and all the rest of it. AI is another one of those transformational tools that will be part of what happens in the future. Who knows what's coming along next? We don't know, but we don't like obsessing on the AI dimension, despite the fact that it's important. So in the course of that week, that resolution was passed. CARICOM, it's had its critics in the past. It's got a very interesting checkered history. We felt, and others felt, if I can report their feelings, people who have these responsibilities also believe that perhaps this digital transformation is an opportunity for the CARICOM nations to come together at a really critical point and help create this environment that enables a regional solution to this challenge, but also massive opportunity. So now we are working on taking that resolution to the next stage, which would be a treaty stage, which brings those principles central to the efforts of the ministers and CARICOM, and brings into being WDG as a international treaty organization. That's neither here nor there, but it gives the declaration that we want to do something together to change the region and create this regional services power, some meaning. So to your question, I'll just, while I'm thinking of it, then what do we do? Policy creation, change the laws so that as much as we possibly can, we have harmonized regulations, which enables all those other things to happen. But how does that happen? It comes from investment in education. It comes principally, and we're thinking long term, so you have to start at primary school level as well to bring these people on. It's not simply just a little window of kids at 18, 25. And then you've got to create a digital infrastructure that means you've got always on, very high quality connectivity, upgrading of undersea cables. You've got to look at the questions of data centers so that data can be held sovereignly by the countries, holding individuals' data in stewardship for those people. And then you've got to deal with the big question of where does all the power to make all this happen come from. Sorry, Javan, I know you want to.
No, I'm smiling because you preempted what I was going to ask you next, really, because I was going to be the devil's advocate, but I think you probably read my mind. I was like, okay, because what I was going to say is like, okay, we're from the region, John and myself. You're interacting with the region. We've heard a lot of treaties, we've heard a lot of declarations, and then the follow up is like, okay, so this treaty that was signed last year at the last CARICOM heads of government meeting, what's happening with it? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, as I said, you preempted because you went further to talk about, okay, well, because that was going to be my question to you. Okay, beautiful. We're going to have a declaration and a treaty, but what is going to be the follow-up? And most importantly, from yourself as WDG in Telebus, the interaction that you're doing in the region, what would you do, so to speak, to take it from declaration, signatures on a piece of paper, to actual action and realization of opportunity for youth and individuals within the Caribbean?
Yeah, well, that's again, you keep asking really good and fundamental questions. Thank you. And they're not trivial. They are the heart of the matter. What are we doing aside from the work we're doing in the background with the CARICOM countries, and doing our best to sort of encourage and support where we can in that, but from that educational perspective, we've set ourselves some and the nations some quite ambitious targets. So we want to have 1,000 people trained and in jobs by the end of this year in Jamaica.
Excellent.
We spoke at the conference last year about creating in 5, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever the number is. We're not predictors of the future, but we have our ambitions and our vision. We would hope that we can create in the region of 30 to 50,000 jobs in the region by 2032, 33, something like that. Yeah. That sounds like a long way away, but
it's not. It's
not, because you have to plan for all of this.
Correct.
So,
can I just add, Graham? Having been in this space myself for a long time on the infrastructure side, I know we don't have a challenge with subsea capacity. I know certainly the big three countries, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, all have data centers, locally to support data sovereignty. And I think with taking the facility of the OECS as an organization, as a regional body, they can leverage one of the big three for data sovereignty under a separate treaty where, St. Lucia, Dominica, some of the other islands can say, all right, we're going to host our data in Barbados or in Antigua, where there are data centers, and that will be our central hub for our data sovereignty. In terms of so that's infrastructure. As you know, we have IT organizations here on the ground. Some of them have invested, like yourselves, in the region. Security companies,
Yes,
infrastructure
yes.
companies. I think where a lot of the challenge comes into play is that harmonization of the people, in terms of that educational path that you're talking about, and the investment that, from I would say, the global north, the US,
Yes,
Canada,
yes, yes,
Europe,
yes.
to say, okay, look, we recognize that there's a talent pool in the Caribbean, or there's a potential for a talent pool. Unlike, Intelibus and WDG, where you guys have said, look, we're going to make the investment and we're going to come down. Other organizations may have done that from a contact center perspective, but from a knowledge processing perspective, where they're investing in the training, I don't think that we're seeing enough of that.
Yes.
How do we, as a region, and certainly from a government policy, maybe it's more of a marketing, a government marketing body. How do we encourage more of that kind of investment in our region? I mean, I don't want to take away from what Intelibus or create competition for you guys, but if we had 5 Intellibuses in the region coming down and doing the work, or supporting and helping to bridge that gap, then I think we'll see a leap forward, because I think the policy frameworks that you guys have been working on with CARICOM and the context, I think that can be adopted easier if there was evidence that we have that interaction of that foreign trade in technology and software development going on.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts?
Brilliant.
So yeah, that's an important aspect of this. So very briefly, first of all, when we talk to people like yourselves and others, whether they're in the private sector, education, government, when you talk about this opportunity in the round, as we are here, many people are quite quickly inspired by what could unfold. The opportunity, let's say.
Potential,
The potential here. To be able to do this, it's one thing, like we all agreed, it's one thing to spout on about it, but the second is to make it happen. So when it comes to the jobs question, how are we doing this? Because we are doing it as we speak, and matching, creating capacity with demand. It's several people. I spoke with somebody very senior in the private sector, represents Jamaica in the UK, who spoke about that to me just last week. We were having a conversation in London, and he said, this is the key, because if we have all these people who are well trained and they can't get a job, then very quickly that's a very dispiriting kind of thing. Education authorities from high schools through to the universities, UTech, UE, etc., they all recognize this. We now have an MOU and quite a strongly growing relationship with the University of the West Indies. So this is one of the piece parts. You've got to put all of these different piece parts together in place that you're talking about, so that we can bring together all of these various people, whether they're private sector, public sector, etc., into actually creating this resource around the academy, the AI Academy. So we're looking right now for a space. We're talking about several hundred acres to be able to create a campus and all the ancillary piece parts that you need for that. That is a showcase as well as an actual place
Right.
demonstrating that the Caribbean is a serious player in creating a global digital services resource and hub for excellence. So
Excellent.
that's in
Fantastic.
play. Now, it's an ill wind that brings nobody any good, and is tragic for a lot of people in the Caribbean and Western Jamaica in particular. Melissa, was what it has done is concentrated thinking at a government and private sector level, and we're quite deeply involved in some pilot projects that we're doing in various parishes, not just around education, not only about education, but partly education, partly farming, partly healthcare, partly small business development. And how digital technology can help all that. So
Fantastic.
these are other threads that need to be brought together. So it's not just the ICT ministers or the Minister of Finance. It's the Minister of Health. It's the Minister of Agriculture. It's the Minister of Trade and Development. Whatever it is, this is where all these things come together. And if the ministers of the region come together, all of this creates power. Now, where does the money come from to enable all of this? Because nothing happens without money. Just take the Jamaican example at the moment, that none of this is secret. There's been announcements about the World Bank and other multilaterals providing, credit to up to, 7 or 8, maybe up to 10 billion US over the next few years. We would hope and expect that once that's security is provided, then the private sector will dive in and see the opportunities as well.
Right.
So from our perspective, we're not alone in this. Other people are doing it, but we're doing our part to help work with the Jamaican government around harmonizing and encouraging that investment process to help where we're asked to put our our shoulder to the wheel. And without going into, I can't go into detail on some of those things, but they're happening, and they're happening in terms of how do you pay for such a big vision of an educational and infrastructural transformation in good time, good time, because you can't build
the
a power
world is
station.
moving on.
Yeah, the world's moving on.
Very
And if we want to create, small modular reactor, project, or a biomass project that's pumping out 5, megawatts or whatever it is to support the data centers and so on, then you've got to start planning and investing now, because otherwise you're never going to get there. It's just going to be nice talk. So I'll give you an example. I just saw this morning. And there are lots of good organizations out there doing their bits on policy and regulations and all the rest of it. How do we bring all those players together? I had a meeting with one of the big regional digital infrastructure providers yesterday about this very topic. Very keen to pursue joined up initiatives that involve people like us, involve the government, involve them. We're talking about the new undersea cable that's going south of Jamaica. How do we, pull that in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things. But there's been a national AI task force in Jamaica. I know there's others in other islands, et cetera. But he put on LinkedIn this morning. So they put a report in. Now they've reconstituted with urgency their AI task force going forward. So they've got a whole bunch of people that have come together. We're not on this thing. It's a separate government initiative. But here's the message from the minister, Mr. Wheatley, and.
Yes, I know exactly.
Some people know Mr. Wheatley.
You're referring to. Yes. He used to write for a publication, but yes, continue.
I think that's right. So Chris Record, who's the chairman of this task force, you probably know Chris. He put this up on LinkedIn this morning and saying the message from Mr. Wheatley was simple. This goes to the whole thing we're talking about in many respects. We've been tasked to move from conversation to execution.
Yes.
With two concrete streams of work. This is why I'm saying it's an ill wind that blows over good. What that hurricane, I think, has done, for at least from my observation, is concentrate minds.
Focused.
Yeah, focus. Everybody can do a lot with focus. So, two concrete streams of work: a national AI policy that helps Jamaica maximize opportunity, build capability, and guide responsible adoption. Two, a review of our legal and regulatory framework to ensure Jamaica is fit for purpose in the AI era, protecting citizens while enabling innovation. So that to me is a very important phrase.
Yeah.
Protecting citizens while enabling innovation, which points to me is, okay, let's find the middle way between open slather and responsible.
Correct.
So the last thing he said is, an important point that stood out was the emphasis on public trust and inclusion with representation across government, private sector, academia, and civil society. That's exactly how serious national framework should be built, with the people not above the people. Interestingly enough, and I wanted to get this in, but I haven't said it yet, I might have mentioned this to you guys separately, but it wasn't until about early last year that we recognized there was a secret reason that we hadn't even been aware of that we ended up coming to Jamaica, aside from all of the other things I've talked about. That is that Jamaica is the only country we know of in the world that has enshrined in their statute books a law that says you, the Jamaican citizen, own your data.
Yes.
No bank, no government,
Right.
no tax department, no private organization can own your data. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's out there. It's all done and dusted in your Facebook or LinkedIn or, whatever else you're doing. But in terms of the future, that's a critical step, because if you want to avoid digital slavery or a new era of digital colonialism, and Ed talked about that just last week, Javan, at the Canada Caribbean Institute meeting in Trinidad, which was just a week or 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
He talked about digital colonialism and that the danger of that. So the importance is you own your digital you as a foundational aspect of this. So people are then asking the questions we've been having this conversation about. How do you turn that into reality? You utilize by prioritizing the investment funding that is appearing to ensure that you protect and enhance your national future by investing in your people. Because we believe, and this is a separate conversation, that your people, the youth of the country that's coming on, and it's the same for all developing nations, they are your most valuable asset. Yes, bauxite's important, agriculture's important, oil is important, all of those things, but the most important
human
that
capital.
you have to protect is your human capital. Now, that's what we believe is important, and one of the critical things for this region is it's not just theoretically your most important asset, that human capital, but we think there's a way to measure, and this is maybe for another podcast, we think there's a way to measure your human capital potential as an investable asset.
Resource, got you.
I will leave that for another conversation.
For another podcast, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a brilliant Brilliant piece there from you, Graham. And, the conversation so far today has been really enlightening, really informative, and educational, quite frankly. A lot of insight has been shared. And I think we've come on the perfect note to wrap our conversation today, Graham. And we talk about data, particularly data sovereignty is a big conversation that has been happening very much so in the developed world. You alluded to it in the initial parts of your conversation with us here today. Data from the region is stored at data centers in California, in Arizona, all these different places. A few data centers are in the Caribbean. But how important, by way of an opportunity realization, is data sovereignty and that entire concept? And we'll use this to wrap our conversation today. Some final thoughts. Data sovereignty as an opportunity realization pathway for the Caribbean, for opportunity, economic opportunity, I should say, for the region.
Yes, again, from our perspective, a great question. Data sovereignty underpins everything else. Because if you do not have data sovereignty, and we can have a great conversation about what that actually means in practice, but in theory, and as I said, there's a long way to go from creating a law on a statute book, as Jamaica has done. There's a long way to go between creating that statute, which is a fantastic initiative. The person whose initial idea was this needs to receive the highest accolades and orders of merit, or whatever they are, from the Jamaican government in the fullness of time.
Yeah.
But to be the first to do that about the individual's ownership of their digital you. And your digital you, like me and everybody else, is here or in the device we're talking to each other on now, or whatever. That's your digital who you are. And what we believe is that it's just as important now to create that digital sovereignty, just as all of us, whether we're in the Caribbean or whether, over hundreds of years in Great Britain or wherever it is, the US, revolutions and civil wars and all the rest of it, to get to the point where the personal, the physical me is sovereign. Nobody owns me. And we have guardrails to ensure that that stays the same.
Yeah.
We should have similar sovereignty and guardrails and assurances and protections from our national government that we have for our personal selves over our digital self. And that goes for governments as well. All that data that they hold, all of that information, that valuable, incredibly valuable information, especially in the AI age where, every time there's a query into ChatGPT, we use the annual power output of a small Caribbean island just to answer one question,
Right.
and we keep doing it for every question again and again and again. If you have inferencing centers that don't have suck up so much power, then life is so much more simple. If you have it housed sovereignly in your own backyard, with agreed, trusted
Backup contingency.
backup. So in contingency, all of that, again, critical. So if we start from that point and recognize that nations, governments, and their agencies have a duty of care to their citizens to equally carefully protect that information and utilize it for the benefit of the citizens and the nation, then everything else can happen. Because if you don't have those preconditions, then it doesn't matter what else you spend your money on, you don't have the basics in place, just like the policy and the regulatory environment, because that's about clarity and trust and transparency and all of the things that create consent. So consent, fundamental principle is putting all of those things in
Together.
place.
Yeah. Well, Graham, I want to thank you. Actually, before I let Jono come in with his thoughts.
Graham, as usual, always a pleasure having these conversations with you. We could probably spend another 3 hours going through each
Yes.
topic, and then talking about some cricket in between, and then
Yeah, all the
Maybe
good
having a
stuff.
cup of tea as
and
well.
while we're having a cup of tea with something in it.
Yes.
But no, I really appreciate your time this morning. As always, we're looking forward to meeting up with you this year. We have a lot of work to do in our region, and we're always happy for your support and your guidance.
Most
It,
definitely.
Javon.
Thank you, guys. I very, very much appreciate that. I value what we have done so far in this journey that we're all on. I don't like that that term. We're just here and we're doing it, and I look forward to us being able to do more together to create this, to help create this this world, and that we envision, and I think increasingly many of us share. So our job is not to lead or own any of this or whatever. You know, we have our, you know, on the Intellibus side, putting aside the separate digital governance stuff, we have our own reasons for wanting to help bring this into reality. But at the same time, what we hope we can do is put this in these ideas and these opportunities and these you know, visions of what the future might look like into the hands of the people whose future it really is, which is every citizen of the Caribbean. And you know, we just feel very privileged to have found all of you and the receptivity to some of these ideas, and we will contribute as much as we can in any way we can with anybody who's interested in talking.
Thank you so much, Graham. We really appreciate you taking the time for speaking with us today. And, you know, the objective that we're all on collectively is to collaborate to create value for our region, for the future, most importantly, that we leave a future that the youth who are coming behind us could have economic activity realized, could have social enterprise also realized. So it's really wonderful when we can come together from our various institutions. We really value the work that you guys are doing at WDG, Intellibus, coming into the region, believing in the region most importantly, because, you know, so often many within the global north do not believe in the potential of the region. So it's really wonderful to see an international organization such as WDG, international companies such as Intellibus coming to the Caribbean, putting investment in the Caribbean of your very own resources of time and financial resources to ensure that there is development for the young people of the Caribbean and for some of the key institutions with whom you are working with. So, you know, from both Jonathan and myself, we are very, very enthused to be working with you. And we look forward to seeing you very soon in a warm location. And hopefully we will sip something that is very nice.
All I can say is I very much look forward to that moment. And I think for all of us, Ed, my primary collaborator, all of the people that we've hired and helping to train so far in Jamaica, it is a great privilege to be part of this.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Graham.
Appreciate
We
you,
look forward
Graham.
to talking again soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Blessings.
Bye for now.
All right.
Blessings to you.